Hello students, I am Raman Gupta from Government College Bara, and in this video we'll discuss about the metaphysical poets and their poems. Metaphysical poets, this name which was given by Dr. Johnson in derision because of the fantastic form of Donne's poetry, is often applied to all minor poets of the Puritan age. We use the term here in a narrower sense, excluding the followers of Daniel and that later group known as the Cavalier poets. We are not including the followers of Daniel and the Cavalier poets. It includes Donne, Herbert, Waller, Derham, Cowley, Vaughan, Davenant, Marvell, and Crashaw. These are the major poets of this age, of this trend. The advanced student finds them all worthy of study, not only for their occasional excellence poetry, but because of their influence on later literature. Crashaw, Richard Crashaw, 1613 to 1649, the Catholic mystic, is interesting because his troubled life is singularly like Donne's, and his poetry is at times like Herbert's set on fire. Abraham Cowley, 1618 to 1667, who blossomed young and who, at 25, was proclaimed the greatest poet in England, is now scarcely known even by name, but his Pindaric codes set an example which influenced English poetry throughout the 18th century. Henry Vaughan, 1622 to 1695, is worthy of study because he is in some respects the forerunner of Wordsworth. Henry Vaughan. This is very important from objective questions point of view. Who is the precursor or forerunner of Wordsworth, William Wordsworth? So the answer is Henry Vaughan. And Andrew Marvell, because of his loyal friendship with Milton, and because his poetry shows the conflict between the two schools of Spenser and Donne. Edmund Waller, 1606 to 1687, stands between the Puritan age and Restoration. He was the first to use consistently the closed now. Without wasting time, we are going to discuss John Donne, who is the most important poet for us. The briefest outline of Donne's life shows its intense human interest. He was born in London, the son of a rich iron merchant, at the time when the merchants of England were creating a new and higher kind of princess. On his father's side, he came from an old Welsh family, and on his mother's side, from the Haywoods and St. Thomas More's family. Both families were Catholic, and in his early life, persecution was brought near, for his brother died in prison for harboring a prescribed priest, and his own education could not be continued in Oxford and Cambridge because of his religion. Such an experience generally sets a man's religious standards for life. Are presently done as he studied law at Lincoln's Inn, was investigating the philosophic grounds of all faith. Gradually, he left the church in which he was born, renounced all dominations, and called himself simply Christian. Meanwhile, he wrote poetry and shared his wealth with needy Catholic relatives. He joined the expedition of Essex for Cadiz in 1596 and for the Azores in 1597, and on sea and in camp found time to write poetry. Two of his best poems, The Storm and the Calm, being belong to this period. Next, he traveled in Europe for 3 years but occupied himself with study and poetry. Returning home, he became secretary to Lord Egerton and fell in love with the latter's young niece, whose name is Anne More. So, the name of Donne's beloved was Anne More, and married her, for which cause Donne was cast into prison. He was prisoned because he married the niece of Lord Egerton. Strangely enough, his poetical work at this time is not a song of youthful romance, but the progress of the soul, a study of transmigration. Years of wandering and poverty followed until Sir George Moore forgave the young lovers and made an allowance to his daughter. So now we'll see what Donne's poetry has special. Donne's poetry is so uneven, at times so startling and fantastic, that few critics would care to recommend it to others. Only a few will read his works, and they must be left to their own browsing to find what pleases them, like deer, which in the midst of plenty take a bite here and there and wander on, tasting 20 varieties of food in an hour's feeding. One who reads much will probably bewail Donne's lack of any consistent style or literary standard. For instance, Chaucer and Milton are as different as two poets could well be, yet the work of each is marked by a distinct and consistent style, and it is the style as much as the matter which makes the Tales or the Paradise Lost a work for all time. The next poet, which is of great importance, is George Herbert. George Herbert, who was born in 1593 and died in 1633, belongs to the same trend of metaphysical poetry. O day most calm, most bright, O day most calm, most bright, sang George Herbert and we may safely take that single line as expressive of the whole spirit of his writings. Professor Palmer, whose scholarly edition of this poet's works is a model for critics and editors, calls Herbert the first in English poetry who spoke face to face with God. So, this is another question for objective type point of view, that who spoke face to face with God among English poets. So, the name of the poet is George Herbert. That may be true, but it is interesting to note that not a poet of the first half of the 17th century, not even the gayest of the cavaliers, but has written some noble verse of prayer or aspiration, which expresses the underlying Puritan spirit of his age. These are different terms: cavalier, poets, and Puritan spirit. So, we'll discuss in the coming videos what these terms mean. Herbert is the greatest, the most consistent of them all. In all the others, the Puritan struggles against the Cavalier, or the Cavalier breaks loose from the restraining Puritan. But in Herbert's, the struggle is past and peace has come. It means that in other poets of this trend, their works show that there is some fight between the thoughts, but in the Herbert's poetry, there is no struggle. Struggle has come to an end, and there is utter peace. So, the rank of George Herbert is at the top. That his life was not all calm, that the Puritan in him had struggled desperately. So, these are the important poets of this trend, and the rest of the minor poets we have discussed in the earlier part of this video only. So read it well, and you can ask me if there is any problem. Okay, and have a nice day. Thank you.